The winter of 1882 had come early to Silver Creek, Montana territory, bringing with it a bitter wind that cut through the thickest wool coats and chilled men to their bones. Main Street, usually bustling with miners and merchants, lay nearly deserted under a gray December sky that promised more snow before nightfall. From the Lucky Strike saloon came the familiar sounds of a Saturday afternoon, the tinny notes of an out-of-tune piano, the clink of glasses, and the rough laughter of men seeking warmth in whiskey and companionship. But today, something else drew folks from their shelters, the slurred shouting of Josiah Brennan as he stumbled out the saloon's swinging doors, dragging someone behind him. "Come on, you worthless thing." His voice cracked like a whip across the frozen street. "Time somebody else dealt with you." The figure he hauled by the wrist was his daughter, Martha. At 19, she should have been married with children of her own. But Martha Brennan had been born into a world of silence. The fever that took her hearing as a baby had also stolen her father's love, replacing it with shame that fermented over the years into something uglier. She stumbled in the muddy snow, her thin dress offering no protection against the cold. Her father had sold her winter shawl months ago for drinking money. Martha's dark hair hung loose and tangled around a face that might have been pretty if not for the perpetual look of wariness that haunted her features, the expression of someone who had learned to anticipate blows before they came. "She's deaf," Josiah bellowed to the growing crowd, swaying on his feet. The smell of cheap whiskey rolled off him in waves. "Deaf as a stone, can't hear nothing, can't speak proper neither." Windows creaked open along the street. Shopkeepers emerged from doorways, and even some of the saloon's patrons spilled out to witness the spectacle. In a town where entertainment was scarce, a public humiliation drew an audience like honey drew flies. Mrs. Abigail Fletcher, the minister's wife, clutched her shawl tighter and whispered to her companion, "That poor child? Someone should do something." But no one moved. They never did. 19 years I've fed this burden," Josiah continued, spittle flying from his lips. 19 years of shame. Her mother died birthing her, and for what? For this." He shook Martha's arm violently, causing her to stumble again. Martha kept her eyes down, watching the snow beneath her feet. She had learned long ago that meeting people's gazes only invited more cruelty. Though she couldn't hear their words, she could read the disgust on their faces, feel the weight of their judgment like stones upon her shoulders. "So here's what I'm doing," Josiah announced, spreading his free arm wide as if addressing a theater audience. "I'm giving her away, free to anyone who'll take her." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter ran through the crowd. Some men elbowed each other, making crude jokes. Others simply stared, their faces a mixture of pity and relief that this wasn't their problem. "She can cook some," Josiah went on, his words slurring together. "Knows how to clean. Can't talk back neither. Perfect woman, ain't she?" More laughter, uglier this time. Young Tommy Morrison, the blacksmith's apprentice, started forward as if to intervene, but his master grabbed his shoulder. "Don't be a fool, boy. That's family business." "But Mr. Garrett, he's her father. Law says he can do what he wants with her." Martha lifted her head slightly, just enough to scan the crowd. She recognized most of the faces, people she'd served at her father's house when he still allowed her that dignity. People whose laundry she'd taken in to earn the few coins her father didn't find and drink away. Not one of them would meet her eyes now. "Come on," Josiah roared. "Somebody take her. She don't eat much. Hell, I'll even throw in $5 to sweeten the deal." He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a crumpled bill. $5 whole to take this deaf burden off my hands." The crowd stirred uneasily. Even in a frontier town where life was hard and morality flexible, there were lines. Selling one's daughter, even a damaged one, sat wrong with most folks. But still, no one spoke up. Martha's fingers moved slightly, forming words in the sign language she'd taught herself from a book she'd found years ago, before her father discovered and burned it. The gestures meant nothing to anyone here, but they comforted her, silent prayers in her own private language. "Nobody?" Josiah sounded genuinely surprised. "She's young still, got all her teeth, strong enough for work." He jerked her forward, spinning her around like livestock at auction. "Look at her! Ain't she worth $5 to somebody?" An old miner named Cyrus spat tobacco juice into the snow. "Josiah, you're drunk. Take the girl home." Home? Josiah laughed bitterly. What home? You think I can keep paying rent when I got this millstone round my neck? Henderson's already threatening eviction. This was news to some, though not surprising. Josiah Brennan had been sliding downhill since his wife died, and the past year had seen him accelerate his descent. The small farmstead outside town had been sold, then the good furniture, then anything else of value. Now he lived in a rented room above the hardware store, and apparently couldn't afford even that. Please, Josiah's voice cracked, shifting from anger to self-pity in the way of long-time drunks. Somebody's got to take her. I can't do it no more. Martha stood perfectly still, snow beginning to collect on her shoulders and in her dark hair. She'd learned to make herself small, to occupy as little space as possible. If she could have disappeared entirely, she would have. Sheriff William Cooper had been watching from his office doorway. He sighed heavily and started forward, knowing he should put a stop to this. But before he could take more than a few steps, the crowd's attention shifted. Someone was coming down the street. The figure emerged from the swirling snow like something out of a frontier legend. He stood near 7 feet tall, his broad shoulders wrapped in a buffalo hide coat that had seen better decades. Long black hair, streaked with premature gray, hung past his shoulders, and his face bore the kind of scars that told stories men didn't ask about. He was Apache. That much was clear from his features and the way he moved, with the fluid grace of someone who'd learned to walk silent before he'd learned to walk at all. But he wore white man's clothes beneath that buffalo coat, and his boots were cavalry issue, though worn and patched. The crowd parted before him like the Red Sea before Moses. Conversations died, and even the wind seemed to quiet as he approached. This was survival instinct, pure and simple. You didn't live long on the frontier without learning to recognize a dangerous man when you saw one. Josiah, drunk as he was, felt it too. His grip on Martha's wrist loosened, and he took an involuntary step back. The Apache stopped 10 feet away, his dark eyes taking in the scene. The drunken father, the silent daughter, the watching crowd. His gaze lingered on Martha, and something shifted in his expression. Not pity, this wasn't a man who dealt in pity, but recognition of something the others couldn't see. When he spoke, his voice was deep and quiet, barely above a whisper, yet somehow everyone heard him clear as church bells. I know you can hear. The words weren't addressed to Josiah or the crowd. They were for Martha alone, spoken with a certainty that made her head snap up, eyes wide with shock. For the first time in 19 years, someone had seen through her secret. The silence that followed stretched taut as a bowstring. Martha's heart hammered against her ribs, and she fought the urge to flee. How could he know? She'd kept her secret for so long, enduring beatings rather than reveal the truth, that the fever had left her hearing damaged but not destroyed. She could hear, though sounds came muffled and distant, like voices through water. The Apache man stood motionless, patient as stone. Up close, the crowd could see more details. The small beaded medicine bag at his belt, the knife handle worn smooth from use, the way his eyes never quite stopped moving, cataloging threats even in apparent stillness. He might have been 30 or 50. His face had the ageless quality of those who'd lived hard but clean. Josiah found his voice first, though it came out higher than usual. Who the hell are you? The man's gaze shifted to him, and Josiah took another step back. Name's Samuel Crowfeather, he said, the English precise but accented. Though most just call me Crow. Well, Crow, Josiah tried to inject authority into his voice and failed. This ain't none of your business. This here's a family matter. You offered her to anyone? Crow's voice remained level. I'm anyone. A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone whispered, That's the one lives up on Bear Mountain. Scouts for the army sometimes. Trades pelts in town twice a year, another added. Never causes trouble. Still Apache, came a third voice, heavy with implication. Crow seemed not to hear them, his attention returning to Martha. He extended one massive hand, palm up, the gesture somehow both offering and question. Martha stared at it, then at his face. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, but there was something in them she'd never seen directed at her before. Respect. You can't just, Josiah sputtered. She's my daughter. $5. Crow reached into his coat with his free hand, pulling out a small leather pouch. You named your price. The coins clinked as he poured them into his palm. Not 5, but 10 silver dollars, enough to keep a man drunk for a month or pay off pressing debts. The crowd pressed closer, drawn by the glint of real money. Josiah's eyes fixed on the silver with naked hunger. $10? For the disrespect, Crow said simply. No woman should be sold like cattle, but if it ends her suffering. He let the words hang. Martha watched this exchange with growing alarm. Trading one prison for another wasn't freedom. She'd heard the stories about what Indians did to white women, whispered tales meant to frighten children and justify violence. But as she looked at this man, really looked at him, she saw none of the savage brutality the stories promised. Instead, she saw scars that spoke of survival, hands that were strong but careful, and eyes that had seen too much yet hadn't gone cold. Deal! Josiah lunged for the money, greed overcoming fear. She's yours, Apache, and good riddance. He shoved Martha forward so hard she stumbled. Crow caught her arm, steadying her with surprising gentleness. This close, she could smell wood smoke and pine resin, leather, and something wild that reminded her of the forest after rain. Her things? Crow asked. Josiah laughed, an ugly sound. What things? The dress she's wearing is about all she's got. It was true. Everything Martha owned fit in a small bundle, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in their rented room. Her mother's bronze hairbrush, a few precious books, needle and thread, and the wooden doll her mother had carved while pregnant, waiting for her child to be born. She'd learned to travel light, to hide what mattered. Sheriff Cooper finally pushed through the crowd. Now hold on just a minute. You can't just buy a person, even if she's deaf. Crow's voice carried an edge now. Even if her own father throws her to the street? Where were you 5 minutes ago, Sheriff? Cooper flushed. That's different. You were about to do nothing, like always. This came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Fletcher, the minister's wife. She stepped forward, chin raised. We all were. We've watched this child suffer for years and done nothing. She looked at Martha with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, dear. We all are. But Martha wasn't looking at her. Her attention was fixed on Crow, who had switched to sign language, his large hands moving with surprising fluency. You decide. Come with me or stay. Your choice. The shock of seeing someone in this town speak her private language nearly buckled her knees. Her own hands trembled as she signed back. You know signs. Had a friend once, cavalry scout, lost his hearing to cannon fire. His signs were flavored with an older dialect. Military signals mixed with Plains Indian trade signs. But understandable. He taught me. Said the silent speech was sacred. Only truth could live in it. Martha's eyes burned with unshed tears. Years of isolation, of being treated as less than human, and here was someone speaking to her as an equal. Her hands moved hesitantly. Why? Why what? Why help me? Crow was quiet for a moment, his hands still. Then, because I know what it is to be seen as less than human, to have people fear what they don't understand. What's all that hand-waving? Someone in the crowd demanded. They're talking, Sheriff Cooper said slowly, comprehension dawning. She's talking. But she's deaf, Josiah protested, the silver dollars already disappearing into his pockets. Deaf and dumb. Deaf, maybe, Crow said aloud, his eyes never leaving Martha's face. Dumb, no. He signed to her again. Will you come? Martha looked around at the faces surrounding them, some hostile, some pitying, none understanding. She thought of the small room above the hardware store, of her father's fists when the drink was in him, of 19 years of being a burden, a shame, a thing to be hidden. Then she looked at Crow, patient and still, offering not ownership but choice, the first real choice anyone had ever given her. She nodded. Good. Crow shrugged off his buffalo coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. It smelled of smoke and safety, and swallowed her small frame completely. We go now. Wait. Josiah seemed to realize what he'd done, sobriety creeping in at the edges. I didn't mean... She's my daughter. Was, Crow corrected. You took the silver, in front of witnesses. But she can't just go off with a savage. This from Silas Boone, the bank manager's son, young and arrogant with carefully waxed mustache. "It ain't decent." Crow's expression didn't change, but something in his stance shifted, and suddenly the 7 feet of him seemed to take up more space. "More decent than selling her on the street?" "You know what I mean," Silas pressed, too proud to recognize danger. "A white woman with an Apache? People will talk. People always talk." Crow turned his back on them, an insult and dismissal in one gesture. He signed to Martha. "My horse is at the end of the street. Can you ride?" "A little," she admitted. "Good enough." They walked through the crowd, which parted reluctantly. Martha kept her eyes forward, her chin raised. She could feel the weight of their stares, hear the whispers starting already. But wrapped in the warmth of the buffalo coat, walking beside this strange, scarred man who spoke to her as a person, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Behind them, Josiah's voice rose in a wail. "Martha, Martha, come back. I didn't mean it. I'm your father." But Martha didn't turn around. She'd been deaf to his pleas for years before she'd learned to truly close her ears. And Crow, reading something in her rigid shoulders, placed one gentle hand on her back, guiding her forward. At the end of the street stood a painted horse, black and white in patches that reminded Martha of winter itself. Crow swung up easily despite his size, then reached down for her. She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand, letting him pull her up to sit sideways in front of him. "This ain't over," Silas Boone shouted. "Sheriff, you can't just let him take her." Sheriff Cooper sighed. "No law's been broken here, Silas. Leave it be." "But she's—" "What?" Cooper's voice hardened. "Deaf, unwanted, better off anywhere but here. Which one were you about to say?" As Crow turned the horse toward the mountain trail, Martha caught a last glimpse of her father. He stood in the middle of the street, silver dollars clutched in one hand, the other reaching out as if he could pull her back. For a moment, she almost felt pity for him. Then Crow clicked to the horse, and they were moving, leaving Silver Creek and its judgments behind. The snow fell heavier now, covering their tracks almost as soon as they made them. Martha pulled the buffalo coat tighter and leaned back slightly against Crow's solid presence. She didn't know what lay ahead, didn't know if she was trading one danger for another. But for the first time in 19 years, she was traveling towards something instead of merely enduring. And that, she decided as the town disappeared into the swirling white behind them, was enough to start with. The journey up Bear Mountain took 3 hours through falling snow and gathering darkness. Martha had never been this far from town, never seen the wilderness except as a distant line of trees from her father's window. Now it swallowed them whole. Ancient pines standing like cathedral pillars, their branches heavy with white, creating a hushed world where the only sounds were the horses breathing and the soft crunch of hooves on snow. Crow rode in silence, but it wasn't the oppressive quiet she knew from home. This was comfortable, patient. Occasionally his hands would move in her peripheral vision, signing simple things. "Hold tight here. Low branch coming. Almost there." The cold should have been bitter, but wrapped in his buffalo coat with his warmth at her back, Martha felt safer than she had in years. She found herself studying his hands on the reins, scarred but gentle with the horse, missing the tip of one little finger, a white line across the knuckles speaking of old battles. When they finally stopped, full darkness had fallen. Martha could barely make out the shape of a cabin nestled against a rock face, almost invisible until Crow lit a lantern by the door. It was smaller than she'd expected, but solidly built, logs fitted tight, with real glass windows and a stone chimney already threading smoke into the night sky. "Wait," he signed, then dismounted and reached up to help her down. Her legs, numb from riding, buckled slightly, and he steadied her with the same careful touch he'd shown in town. The cabin's interior was a revelation. Where she'd expected dirt floors and crude furniture, she found worn but clean wooden planks, a proper iron stove radiating warmth, and shelves lined with unexpected treasures. Books, dozens of them. Tools hung neat on the walls. Herbs dried from the rafters, filling the air with sage and sweetgrass. But what drew her eye were the carvings. They covered every surface, intricate patterns flowing across furniture, tiny animals marching along shelf edges, and larger pieces standing alone. A wolf mid-howl. An eagle with wings spread. A woman's face emerging from wood grain. So lifelike Martha expected her to blink. Crow followed her gaze. "My work," he signed, then added aloud, "helps pass the winter nights." He moved around the cabin with practiced efficiency, adding wood to the stove, lighting oil lamps, pulling food from a wooden cash box. Martha stood uncertain in the middle of it all, still wearing his buffalo coat like armor. "Sit," he signed, gesturing to a chair by the stove. "You're safe here. Safe." Such a small word for such a large thing. As she sat, he filled a pot with snow from outside, setting it on the stove to melt. From a shelf, he pulled down 2 ceramic mugs, clearly store-bought, decorated with tiny blue flowers. The incongruity of those delicate cups in his large, scarred hands made something ease in Martha's chest. While the water heated, he moved to a trunk in the corner. Opening it, he pulled out folded cloth, a woman's dress in soft gray wool, mended but clean, and a shawl knitted in patterns she didn't recognize. "These were my sisters," he signed, his hands moving slower, weighted with memory. "She died 5 winters ago. Sickness took her." He held them out. They would honor her if you wore them. Martha's hands trembled as she accepted the clothes. They smelled of cedar and lavender, carefully preserved. Through her damaged hearing, she caught his low voice. "Sarah was her English name, small like you, strong like you too." "Thank you," she signed, then pointed to a corner, asking permission to change. He nodded and turned his back, busying himself with the tea. Martha shed her thin, wet dress quickly, gasping at the warmth of the wool against her skin. The dress fit well enough, though she had to roll the sleeves. The shawl was soft as clouds, woven with skill that spoke of long winter evenings and patient hands. When she emerged, Crow had set the small table with those delicate cups, steam rising from pine needle tea. He'd also laid out food, dried meat, journey bread, and surprisingly, a small pot of honey. They ate in companionable silence, but Martha kept stealing glances around the cabin. Everything spoke of a life lived deliberately, with care. No empty whiskey bottles, no careless mess. Even the firewood was stacked with almost artistic precision. "How do you know?" she finally signed. He raised an eyebrow, questioning. "That I can hear. Others never guessed." He was quiet for a long moment, sipping his tea. Then, "Your eyes. When your father shouted, you flinched before seeing his movement. When horses passed on side streets, you turned toward the sound. Small things. You watched me before today? I trade in town twice a year. I see things." His hands paused, then continued. "I saw him strike you last summer, behind the general store." Martha's cheeks burned with old shame. "That day, she dropped a bag of flour, and her father, why didn't you—" She started, then stopped. What could he have done? An Apache defending a white woman would have brought the whole town down on him. "I wanted to," he signed, reading her unfinished question, "but it would have made things worse for you. I learned long ago, sometimes waiting is the only choice." He stood, moving to the shelves, and pulled down a small wooden box. Inside were papers, carefully preserved. He handed her one, a certificate of citizenship, properly stamped and legal. "Samuel Crow Feather," it read. "Citizen of the United States. Served with distinction. Scout Corps, 7th Cavalry. You fought for the Army?" "Scouted. For a time." His signs turned bitter. "Thought it would make a difference. Thought if we proved our worth, they'd let us keep some land, some dignity." He shrugged. "I was young." Martha studied the paper, then him. This man who could have chosen violence in town, who could force whatever he wanted now that they were alone, and instead made tea in flowered cups and offered her his sister's clothes. "Why did you really help me?" she signed. He considered the question, hands still. Then he moved to the shelf of carvings, selecting one, a small bird with a broken wing, carved with such detail she could see individual feathers. But in the carving, the wing was mending, supported by tiny, wooden splints. Found him in the forest. Hawk got him but didn't finish the job. Most would have said let nature take its course. He set the carving in her hands. But sometimes nature needs help. Sometimes broken things deserve a chance to heal. Martha ran her fingers over the delicate carving, throat tight with unshed tears. "I'm not broken," she signed fiercely. No, he agreed. But you've been kept in a cage. Different thing. He moved to a chest by the wall, pulling out blankets and furs. You'll sleep here, he signed, gesturing to the bed built into the wall. A proper bed with a real mattress, not the pile of straw she was used to. I'll take the floor by the stove. That's your bed. And you're my guest. His signs were firm. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. Tonight you rest. Safe. That word again. Safe. As he laid out his bedroll by the stove, giving her privacy to prepare for sleep, Martha found herself studying the cabin again. On a high shelf, she spotted something that made her breath catch. Women's things. A silver brush. A small mirror. A sewing basket with colorful threads spilling out. Your sister's? She signed when he glanced up. He nodded. Couldn't bring myself to pack them away. She loved beautiful things. A ghost of a smile touched his scarred face. Said just because we lived in the wilderness didn't mean we had to live like animals. Martha thought of her mother's bronze brush, hidden under the floorboard in town. The only beautiful thing she owned. She sounds wise. She was. He banked the fire for the night. Movements efficient but gentle. Sleep now. Long day tomorrow. What happens tomorrow? You decide. He met her eyes across the dimly lit cabin. Stay. Go. Learn. Whatever you choose. But tonight just rest. Martha climbed into the bed, the first real bed she'd had in years. The mattress was filled with pine needles and sweet grass, the blankets warm and soft. From where she lay, she could see the carved animals on the shelves seeming to move in the firelight's dance. She watched Crow settle by the stove, his large frame making the cabin seem smaller but somehow more secure. He pulled out a piece of wood and a knife, beginning to carve by feel more than sight, the rhythmic scraping oddly soothing. For the first time in memory, Martha fell asleep without fear of what morning would bring. In this strange cabin high on a mountain, surrounded by carvings and books and the quiet presence of a man who saw her as human, she found something she'd thought lost forever. Peace. Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing all trace of their passage, keeping the world at bay for just a little longer. 2 weeks passed in the mountain cabin before necessity drove them back to Silver Creek. The pelts Crow had trapped needed trading, and supplies were running low. Martha dreaded the return, but Crow's practical signs reminded her that winter was long, and they couldn't hide forever. The morning they descended, she wore Sarah's clothes, the gray wool dress properly hemmed now, the shawl wrapped tight against the cold. Her hair was neatly braided in the style Crow had shown her, a way his sister had worn hers. She looked respectable, cared for, nothing like the ragged creature who'd been dragged through the streets. Remember, Crow signed as they approached town. You owe them nothing. No explanations, no apologies. But Martha could already feel the weight of eyes upon them as they entered Main Street. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Women pulled their children closer. Men stepped out of shops to stare. The first stop was Henderson's general store. They needed flour, salt, coffee, basic things. Crow tied the horse and helped Martha down, his hand lingering on her elbow in silent support. Inside, Mrs. Henderson's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, curiosity, then something harder. Well, she said, loud enough for the other customers to hear, look what the wind blew in. Crow moved through the store with purpose, selecting items while Martha followed. She could hear the whispers starting, caught fragments through her damaged hearing. Living in sin up there. Poor thing, probably doesn't even understand. What else would you expect from an Apache? At the counter, Mrs. Henderson tallied their goods with sharp, aggressive movements. That'll be $2.40, she announced, then added with false sweetness, though I wonder if the young lady knows what kind of arrangement she's entered into. Martha's hands clenched in her shawl, but before she could respond, Crow placed the money on the counter with deliberate calm. The lady knows exactly where she is, he said quietly, which is more than some can say. They were loading supplies when Silas Boone appeared, flanked by 2 friends, Ralph Morrison and Jacob Worth, young men with too much time and too little sense. Silas had dressed for the occasion, his coat brushed and boots shined, as if presenting himself as the better option. Miss Brennan, he called out, ignoring Crow entirely. Martha, you don't have to stay with him. We've arranged something. The church has agreed to take you in. You could work in the minister's house, live respectably." Martha felt Crow tense beside her, but continue securing the supplies. She turned to face Silas, keeping her expression neutral. "She can't hear you, you fool," Ralph laughed. Although looking at her now, cleaned up proper, shame about the ears. "She'd be pretty otherwise." "Pretty enough for some things," Jacob added with a leer that made Martha's skin crawl. Crow straightened slowly, and the three young men took an involuntary step back. But Silas, bolstered by his companions and his own arrogance, pressed on. "We're trying to help," he insisted, now addressing Crow. "It ain't right, her living up there with you. People are talking, saying things, about what an Apache would want with a white woman who can't even scream for help." The implications hung ugly in the cold air. Martha saw Crow's jaw tighten, his hands still, but instead of responding to Silas, he turned to her and signed, "Your choice. We can leave now." She shook her head. They needed these supplies, and she was tired of running. Deliberately, Martha stepped forward and spoke, her voice rusty from disuse, but clear enough. "I can hear you, every filthy word." The shock on their faces might have been comical if she hadn't been so angry. She continued, words coming easier with each one. "I've always been able to hear, and I've heard what this town says about me, about him, about decency." "You can talk," Ralph's voice cracked like a boy's. "Where was your decency?" Martha continued, gaining strength. "When my father beat me, where was the church's help when I was starving? Where were any of you when he tried to sell me like cattle?" "Now see here," Silas started. "No." Her voice cut through his bluster. "You see, this man," she gestured to Crow, "has shown me more respect in 2 weeks than this entire town has in 19 years. He speaks to me, teaches me, treats me as a person, not a burden or a curiosity or a thing to be pitied." Mrs. Fletcher had emerged from the dress shop, drawn by the commotion. Other townspeople gathered, the crowd growing like it had that day in the snow. But this time Martha stood straight, unafraid. "You call him savage," she continued, her voice stronger now. "But he carves beauty from wood while you cultivate ugliness in your hearts. You speak of Christian charity while practicing none. So yes, I choose to stay with him. Not because I have to, because I want to." "But what about your reputation?" Mrs. Fletcher asked, genuine concern in her voice. "Dear, surely you must know what people are saying, that he's made me his woman." Martha felt heat rise in her cheeks but didn't look away. "He's made me nothing. For the first time in my life, I'm allowed to just be." Crow moved beside her then, not touching but present, solid as the mountain itself. "We done here?" he asked the crowd in general. Silas's face had gone red, then purple. "This ain't over. Sheriff Cooper might turn a blind eye, but there are laws about Indians corrupting white women, federal marshals who have better things to do than harass a decorated Army scout and a woman of legal age making her own choices." Sheriff Cooper interrupted, pushing through the crowd. He looked tired, older than his years. "Silas, go home. All of you, go on about your business." "But Sheriff—" "I said go home." Cooper's voice brooked no argument. "Unless you want to explain to Judge Harrison why you're harassing a veteran and a citizen." The crowd began to disperse, but the whispers followed them like smoke. Martha heard the words, fallen, ruined, corrupted. Once, they would have crushed her. Now they seemed small, petty things that couldn't touch the truth of her new life. As they prepared to leave, Josiah Brennan stumbled out of the Lucky Strike. He'd clearly been living in the saloon since that day, his clothes filthy, his face gaunt with constant drinking. Seeing Martha, he lurched toward them. "Martha, my girl!" His voice broke on a sob. "Come home, baby. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it." Martha looked at the man who'd been her father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not a monster, just a weak, broken person who'd let grief and shame poison him until there was nothing left but appetite and regret. "I know," she said quietly. "But sorry doesn't undo the years. Sorry doesn't heal the bruises or fill the empty belly or warm the cold nights. Please." He reached out with shaking hands. "You're all I have left." "No." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I was never what you had. I was what you endured. There's a difference. So, Crow clicked to the horse, and they began moving. Josiah followed for a few stumbling steps before falling to his knees in the muddy street. His wails echoed off the buildings, but Martha didn't look back. At the edge of town, they passed the church. Reverend Fletcher stood on the steps, his wife beside him. He raised his hand as if to call out, then seemed to think better of it. But Mrs. Fletcher stepped forward. "Wait," she called. From her basket, she pulled a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Please, take this." Martha looked at Crow, who nodded. She accepted the package warily. "It's just some needles and good thread," Mrs. Fletcher said quietly. And a book, poetry. I thought you might enjoy it." The unexpected kindness threatened Martha's composure more than all the cruel words had. "Thank you," she managed. Mrs. Fletcher touched her hand briefly. "I'm sorry we failed you, child. All these years, we saw what we expected to see instead of what was." She glanced at Crow. "Both of you." They rode out of town in silence, but it was different from their arrival. Martha sat straighter, no longer hiding in the buffalo coat but wearing it like armor. The whispers and stares followed them, but they seemed to matter less now. "You spoke well," Crow signed once they were back on the mountain trail. "I was angry. Good. Anger's better than fear. It tells truth. What if Silas makes trouble? Federal marshals?" Crow's hands were steady as he signed. "Let them come. I've faced worse for less important things. I'm important?" He reined in the horse, turning so she could see his face clearly. "Yes," he signed simply. "You are." The word hung between them, weightier than all the town's whispers combined. Then he clicked to the horse again, and they continued up the mountain, leaving Silver Creek and its small-minded gossip behind. But Martha knew this wasn't over. Silas Boone's pride had been wounded, and wounded pride in small men led to dangerous things. The town's judgment would follow them, grow teeth and claws, demand its due. For now, though, they climbed toward home. And it was home now, she realized. That cabin with its carvings and books and patient silences, where she could be herself, whoever that turned out to be. The package from Mrs. Fletcher sat warm in her lap, promise of beauty yet to be discovered. Like everything in her new life, it was an unexpected gift in the midst of hardship. And that, Martha thought as the town disappeared behind the trees, was enough reason to keep going. Winter deepened in the mountains, wrapping the cabin in a cocoon of white silence. The days fell into a rhythm that Martha had never known, peaceful, productive, purposeful. She woke each morning to find Crow already up, tending the fire, coffee brewing in the blue enamel pot. They moved around each other with growing ease, two people learning to share space without intrusion. He taught her things, how to read weather and cloud formations and wind patterns, how to set snares for rabbits, skin and prepare pelts, how to identify plants that would survive the winter, which roots could be eaten, which bark made medicine. His hands were patient as he showed her knots for different purposes, how to sharpen knives properly, how to track deer through snow. But it was the evening lessons she treasured most. By lamplight, Crow would bring out books. His collection was surprisingly extensive, traded for over years with travelers and soldiers. He had Shakespeare and Emerson, field guides to western birds, even a worn copy of Jane Eyre that had been his sister's favorite. Martha devoured them all, her hunger for words matching her years of deprivation. "Your hands are quick," he signed one evening as she practiced the Plains Indian trade signs he was teaching her. This language was different from the one she'd learned from her hidden book. More fluid, designed for communication across vast distances and between tribes. "I had years of practice hiding my words," she signed back. "Now I want to speak them all." He smiled, a rare thing that transformed his scarred face. "Careful. Words have power, especially silent ones." She was learning other things about him, too. How he woke sometimes in the night, sweating from dreams he wouldn't discuss. How certain sounds, the crack of breaking wood, the whistle of wind through a particular gap, made him tense like a warrior expecting attack. How gentle he was with small things, feeding winter birds from his hand, coaxing an injured fox kit back to health. One evening, as snow fell thick outside, Martha was attempting to mend one of his shirts. The man was hard on clothes. Her stitches were clumsy, and she pricked her finger, a bead of blood welling up. "Here," Crow said softly, taking the shirt from her. He showed her how to hold the needle properly, how to make stitches that would hold through hard use. His hands guided hers, and Martha found herself aware of their warmth, their careful strength. "Your sister taught you?" she signed when he sat back. "My mother first. Then Sarah, yes." His eyes grew distant. Apache boys learn what they need to survive. Sewing, cooking, building, all survival. Martha wanted to ask about his mother, his past, the scars that marked him. But she'd learned that Crow gave his history in small pieces when ready. Pushing brought only silence. Instead, she returned to the shirt, stitches improving under his guidance. They worked in companionable quiet, the fire crackling, wind singing through the pines outside. It was in moments like these that Martha felt something shifting between them, invisible threads weaving connection. She was reaching for scissors when her hand brushed his. Both froze. The touch was accidental, brief, but it sparked something that made her breath catch. Crow's dark eyes met hers, and in them she saw a mirror of her own confusion. Awareness of a line approaching, uncertainty about crossing it. He pulled back first, standing abruptly. "I'll check the horses," he said, though they both knew he'd checked them an hour ago. Martha watched him go, her hand still tingling where they'd touched. In town, men had looked at her with pity, disgust, or worse, the hunger of those who saw vulnerability as opportunity. But Crow looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous at once, something that required careful handling not from weakness but from respect. The next morning brought clear skies and a different kind of tension. Crow was teaching her to braid leather when they heard horses approaching, multiple riders moving fast. His entire demeanor changed. In seconds, he went from patient teacher to warrior, rifle in hand, positioning Martha behind solid cover. Stay down, no matter what, but it wasn't raiders or federal marshals who emerged from the tree line. It was a hunting party from town. 5 men led by Silas Boone, all armed, all wearing expressions of righteous determination. "We know you're in there, Apache," Silas called out. "Send the girl out. We're here to rescue her." Crow stepped onto the porch, rifle held casual but ready. "No one here needs rescuing. That's not for you to decide." This from Harold Garrett, the blacksmith, a usually reasonable man who'd apparently been swayed by Silas's rhetoric. "Martha Brennan, if you can hear us, we're here to help. Your father's sobered up. He wants you home." Martha felt anger rise in her throat. Her father, sober? She'd believed that when pigs flew. And even if true, it changed nothing. "We have a warrant," Silas announced, producing a paper with obvious pride. "Signed by Judge Wellingham over in Cedar Falls for the corruption of a mentally deficient white woman by a savage Indian." Mentally deficient. The words hit Martha like a slap. All because she couldn't hear perfectly. They'd decided she couldn't think, couldn't choose, couldn't be trusted with her own life. She started to rise, but Crow's hand signal stopped her. "Wait, let me see this warrant," Crow said calmly. Silas dismounted, approaching with swagger until he got close enough to really see Crow, the size of him, the scars, the complete lack of fear in his stance. His steps faltered, but pride drove him forward. Crow took the paper, examined it. "This is signed by a county judge with no jurisdiction here. We're on federal land, ceded to me by treaty for my service." He handed it back. "Also, it names Martha Brennan. No such person lives here." "Don't play games," Silas snarled. "We know she's here." "Martha Crowfeather lives here," Crow said simply. "My wife. Legal and proper, married by tribal custom and recognized by federal law under the Treaty of 1868. The words sent shock through Martha like lightning. Wife? They weren't, hadn't, but Crow's eyes found hers through the window, steady and sure. "Trust me," they said. "That's a lie," Silas spat. She's not capable of." "I'm perfectly capable." Martha stepped out, having heard enough. She moved to stand beside Crow, close enough their shoulders touched. "I'm capable of choosing where I live, who I live with, and what name I take." "Martha, Miss Brennan, you don't understand," Harold tried, his tone paternal. "This Indian has confused you, taken advantage." "The only people who've taken advantage," Martha interrupted, are those who assumed my damaged hearing meant a damaged mind, who spoke about me as if I wasn't there, who saw me as burden or opportunity, but never as a person. But you're not married, Silas insisted. There's been no ceremony, no license. Martha looked at Crow, a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly. Apache marriage requires only 3 things, she said, remembering what he'd taught her about his culture. A man and woman choosing each other, sharing a home, and public declaration. She took Crow's hand, feeling it close warm around hers. Samuel Crow Feather is my husband by his people's law and my choice. The lie came easily because it felt like truth, or near enough. They'd shared a home for over a month now. They'd chosen each other in a way, that day in the snow. And now, the public declaration. This is obscene, one of the other men muttered. A white woman taking up with a decorated army scout? Crow's voice carried an edge now. A man who owns his land free and clear, who can read and write in 3 languages? What exactly is your objection, aside from the color of my skin? You know damn well what our objection is, Silas exploded. It ain't natural, it ain't right, and we won't stand for it. Then sit, Crow suggested mildly. Or better yet, go home. Silas's hand moved toward his gun, but Harold caught his arm. Don't be a fool, boy. You draw on him, he'll kill you where you stand. It was true, Martha realized. The other men sensed it too. Crow's complete readiness for violence, held in check by will alone. He wouldn't start a fight, but he'd finish one decisively. This isn't over, Silas promised, but he was already backing toward his horse. We'll be back with real law. Federal marshals, you'll see. I'll make coffee, Crow said agreeably. Hate to be a poor host. They watched the hunting party retreat, Silas's threats fading with distance. Only when they were gone did Martha realize she was still holding Crow's hand. She started to pull away, but he held on gently. I'm sorry, he said quietly, about the lie. But it was the only way. Was it a lie? The question escaped before Martha could stop it. He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes searching hers. The ceremony doesn't make a marriage. The choice does. The living of it does. His free hand rose to cup her cheek, the touch feather-light. I would choose you, Martha. Have chosen you, but you need to choose too, freely, not because of them. Martha leaned into his touch, years of loneliness and fear melting under the warmth of being wanted. Not as a burden or a possession, but as a partner, an equal. I choose you, she whispered. I chose you that day in the snow when you saw me truly, when you spoke to me instead of about me, when you offered your hand. He kissed her then, soft and careful, as if she might break or flee. Martha had never been kissed before. Her father had made sure no man got close enough to try. But this felt right, felt like coming home after a long, cold journey. When they parted, Crow touched his forehead to hers. They'll be back, he warned. With more men, more papers. It might get ugly. Let them come, Martha said, finding steel in her spine she hadn't known existed. I've been preparing for ugly my whole life. At least now I have something worth fighting for. He smiled again, that rare, transforming expression. My fierce little bird. They have no idea what they're challenging. They went inside together, hands still linked. The cabin felt different now, charged with promise and possibility. What had been refuge was becoming something more. A life, a future, a choice made not in desperation, but in hope. Outside, snow began falling again, covering the tracks of the retreating men. But Martha knew they'd be back, bringing law and prejudice and the weight of a world that couldn't accept what it didn't understand. But for now, in the warmth of the cabin, with Crow's solid presence beside her and the quiet understanding flowing between them, she was content. They'd face tomorrow when it came, together. The rumors started as whispers, carried on winter winds down from Bear Mountain to Silver Creek. By the time they reached the town proper, they'd grown into something monstrous, twisted by repetition and malice. She's with child, Mrs. Garrett told Mrs. Henderson over the general store counter, voice hushed with scandal. My Harold saw her when they confronted that Apache, said she looked different, fuller. After only 2 months, Mrs. Henderson's eyes glittered with the joy of fresh gossip. Well, that tells us what's been happening up there, doesn't it? The story spread like wildfire through frozen streets. By evening, everyone knew. Martha Brennan was carrying the Apache's child. Never mind that it was impossible, that she'd only been gone 8 weeks. In the arithmetic of prejudice, facts were negotiable. Silas Boone seized on the rumors with vicious satisfaction. He'd returned from his failed confrontation humiliated, and this gave him new ammunition. "I told you all," he announced in the Lucky Strike. "That savage has ruined her, defiled her, and now she'll bear his half-breed spawn." Even Sheriff Cooper, usually a voice of reason, looked troubled when the talk reached him. Mixed-blood children faced hard lives, caught between two worlds that wanted no part of them. If Martha really was pregnant. Up on the mountain, Martha remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing below. The days had taken on a deeper sweetness since she and Crow had declared themselves. They still kept separate sleeping arrangements. Crow was too honorable to assume rights she hadn't explicitly granted. But everything else had shifted. They moved together now like dancers who'd found their rhythm. She'd wake to find him braiding her hair with gentle hands, working in beads and feathers that marked her as under his protection. He'd come in from checking traps to find she'd mended all his winter gear and had fresh bread waiting. Small touches became common, his hand on her back as they worked, her fingers brushing his when she handed him tools. It was 3 weeks after Silas's visit when they were forced to return to town. A late blizzard had damaged part of the roof, and they needed specific supplies to repair it before the next storm hit. Martha noticed the difference immediately. Where before people had stared with curiosity or disgust, now they looked at her with something else, a kind of horrified fascination, their eyes dropping automatically to her belly. In Henderson's store, Mrs. Henderson's assistant, young Clara Morrison, actually gasped when Martha entered. "Oh my," she breathed, then flushed red and fled to the back room. "What's wrong?" Martha signed to Crow, confused by the reactions. He'd noticed too, his face darkening as he caught whispered fragments. But he only signed back, "Nothing that matters. Get what we need." They were selecting nails when Josiah Brennan burst through the door. Martha hadn't seen her father since that day in the street, and the change in him was shocking. He was sober, genuinely sober. But it had come too late. His body was wasted, skin yellow with liver damage, hands shaking with permanent tremors. "My daughter," he croaked, lurching toward them. "My little girl. What has he done to you?" "Father," Martha said quietly, backing against Crow's solid presence. "Don't. They're saying—" Josiah's eyes dropped to her stomach, still flat under Sarah's wool dress. "They're saying you're carrying his bastard, that he's planted his seed in you." The words were crude, ugly, and loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. Martha felt heat flood her face, not from shame, but from rage. "The only bastard here," she said clearly, "is the one you made of me with your fists and neglect." "I was trying to protect you," Josiah wailed. "Don't you see? This is what I was afraid of. You, too simple to understand. Taken advantage of by the first savage who—" Crow moved so fast Josiah never saw it coming. One moment the drunk was standing. The next he was pressed against the wall, Crow's hand at his throat, not choking, just holding, controlling. "You will not speak of her that way," Crow said, each word precise as a blade. "Not ever again. She is my wife. You will show respect or you will be silent." "Your wife?" Josiah laughed bitterly. "Your whore, you mean. Everyone knows what you've done to her. How you've ruined her for decent men." Martha stepped forward, placing her hand on Crow's arm. At her touch, he released Josiah, who slumped against the wall. "Listen to me," she said to her father, to the gathering crowd, to the whole narrow-minded town. "Listen carefully, because I'll only say this once. I am not ruined. I am not defiled. I am not with child, though if I were, it would be a blessing, not a curse." "Martha," Mrs. Fletcher had entered, drawn by the commotion. "No," Martha cut her off. "You've all had your say for years. Now it's my turn." She straightened, finding strength in Crow's presence behind her. "You create these stories because the truth is too hard to accept. That I chose him, freely, gladly. That what you call corruption, I call salvation." "You don't know what you're saying," Josiah pleaded. "You're confused, sick." "I was sick," Martha agreed. "Sick from years of being beaten, Sick from being treated as less than human. Sick from a town that watched it happen and did nothing. She looked around at the familiar faces, seeing them clearly. He healed me, not through magic or violation, but through simple kindness, through seeing me as a person worth knowing. But the baby! Clara Morrison had crept back out, unable to resist the drama. What baby? Martha's voice dripped contempt. The one you've all invented? The one that makes your prejudice easier to swallow? There is no baby, yet. When there is, it will be born of love, not the violence you imagine. Harlot, someone whispered. Martha couldn't tell who. If choosing love over fear makes me a harlot, she said calmly, then I'll wear the name with pride. Crow had remained silent through her speech, but now he gathered their supplies with deliberate movements. We're done here, he announced. At the counter, he paid Henderson exactly, then added, we won't be back. From now on, we'll trade at Cedar Falls. Their money spends just as well, and their tongues wag less. As they prepared to leave, Silas Boone burst in with two other men, strangers wearing federal badges. That's them, Silas announced triumphantly. The Apache and the woman he's corrupted. The older marshal, a weathered man named Davis, looked tired. Samuel Crowfeather? I am. We've had a complaint, several actually, about you holding a white woman against her will. Do I look held against my will? Martha asked. Davis studied her, the neat hair, the clean clothes, the way she stood close to Crow by choice. No, ma'am, but I need to ask. Are you here freely? Has this man harmed or forced you in any way? The only force used, Martha said clearly, was by those trying to separate us. My husband has shown me nothing but respect and care. Husband? Davis raised an eyebrow. By Apache custom, Crow confirmed. Legal under treaty law. The marshal sighed. Folks here seem to think the lady is simple-minded, unable to make such choices. Martha laughed, surprising everyone. I speak 3 languages now, English, sign, and Plains trade talk. I can read and write, trap and skin game, identify 30 medicinal plants, and track deer through new snow. If that's simple-minded, what does that make them? Davis's lips twitched toward a smile. Point taken. He turned to Silas. I see no crime here, no evidence of force or corruption. What I see is a legal marriage between 2 adults that some folks don't like. That's not a federal matter. But she's pregnant, Silas exploded. With his mongrel child. Am I? Martha placed her hands on her flat stomach. Dr. Henderson, you delivered half this town. Come examine me. Tell them the truth. The elderly doctor, who'd been watching from the doorway of his practice, shook his head. I don't need to examine you, Martha. Any fool can see you're not with child. Takes more than 2 months to show, for one thing. Then where did such a rumor start? Martha asked innocently, though she knew exactly where. In the poisoned well of Silas Boone's pride. The silence that followed was damning. Even the federal marshals looked disgusted. We're done here, Davis announced. And if I have to ride back up here for more false complaints, someone's going to find themselves charged with filing false reports. That's a federal crime that I do have jurisdiction over. As the marshals left, Silas turned on Martha with naked hatred. You think you've won? You think this is over? No decent person will ever accept you again. You'll be outcasts forever, you and your half-breed brats. Crow stepped forward, but Martha stopped him. This was her fight. Good, she said simply. If decent means being like you, small, cruel, and afraid of anything different, then I want no part of it. I'd rather be an outcast with him than accepted by you. She turned to her father one last time. Goodbye, Father. I forgive you, but I'm done with you. Don't seek me out again. They left then, walking through the parted crowd like Moses through the Red Sea. Behind them, the town exploded in arguments and recriminations. But Martha didn't care. She was done with Silver Creek and its narrow mines. At the edge of town, Crow helped her onto the horse. You spoke well, he said quietly. Like a warrior. I am a warrior, Martha replied. You taught me that. As they rode toward home, she thought about the rumors, the lies, the judgment that would follow them. It didn't matter. Let them invent their stories. The truth, that she'd found love and strength and freedom with this quiet, scarred man, was more scandalous than any lie they could conjure. There really will be children someday, she said suddenly. When we're ready, and they'll be beautiful. Crow's arms tightened around her. They'll be fighters, he agreed. They'll have to be good, Martha said fiercely. The world needs more fighters. Behind them, Silver Creek shrank into the distance, taking its small prejudices with it. Ahead lay Bear Mountain, their cabin, their life together. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But it was theirs, and that was worth fighting for. The night came suddenly, as spring nights do in the mountains, clear skies giving way to storm clouds that rolled in like an invading army. Martha woke to the sound of horses, many of them, and Crow's hand on her shoulder. They're here, he signed in the darkness. Get dressed, quickly. Through the window, she could see torches moving through the trees, at least a dozen men, maybe more. Her heart hammered as she pulled on clothes, hands shaking. They'd known this was coming. After the confrontation in town 2 weeks ago, after the federal marshals had refused to act, she'd seen the promise of violence in Silas Boone's eyes. Crow was already armed, rifle in hand, pistol at his hip. He'd positioned himself by the window, watching the approaching riders with the stillness of a predator calculating odds. How many? Martha signed. 15, maybe 20. His jaw tightened. Too many. The riders stopped just outside rifle range, their torches creating a semicircle of angry light against the darkness. Silas Boone rode at their head, but Martha recognized others. Ralph Morrison, Jacob Worth, men from town who'd drunk enough liquid courage to attempt what they wouldn't dare in daylight. Crow Feather, Silas's voice carried across the clearing. We've come for the woman. Send her out and we'll let you live. Crow's laugh was cold as winter wind. Generous of you. This is your last chance, Apache. We know what you've done to her. The whole territory knows. It's time to end this abomination. Martha started toward the door, but Crow caught her arm. No, I won't let them hurt you because of me. They'll hurt you either way. His eyes were fierce in the dim light. Together or not at all. You've got 1 minute, Silas shouted. Then we burn you out. Martha's mind raced. 20 men, armed and drunk on righteousness. Even Crow couldn't fight those odds. But maybe they didn't need to fight. Maybe... Trust me, she signed. Then before he could stop her, she opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Martha! Several voices called at once, some relieved, some angry. She stood straight, letting the flickering torchlight show her clearly. She'd loosened her hair, letting it fall wild around her shoulders. In the dancing shadows, with her chin raised and eyes blazing, she looked like something out of their deepest fears. A woman transformed, claimed, changed by her time with the Apache. You want me? Her voice carried clear and strong. Then get off your horses and take me. The men stirred uneasily. This wasn't the cowering deaf girl they remembered. This woman stood like a warrior, unafraid. Come on down, miss, Harold Garrett called, trying for a paternal tone. We're here to help you. Help! Martha laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Where was your help when my father beat me bloody? Where was your help when I went hungry? You're not here to help. You're here because you can't stand that I chose him over all of you. You didn't choose, Silas spat. You were corrupted, confused. He's done things to your mind. Yes, Martha interrupted, her voice dropping to something almost intimate. He has. He's taught me to read the stars, to speak without words, to move silent as smoke through the forest. She took a step forward, and several horses shied nervously. He's shown me medicines you've never dreamed of, powers you'd call witchcraft. What are you doing? Crow signed from the doorway. Using their fear, she signed back, hidden from the rider's view. You admit it then, Ralph Morrison called out, voice cracking. He's corrupted you with Indian magic. Magic? Martha smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Is that what you call it when a man treats a woman with respect? When he sees her as more than property or burden? She spread her arms wide. Then yes, I'm thoroughly corrupted, transformed, and I have a message for you all. She began to speak in Plains trade talk, the fluid hand movements accompanied by guttural words they didn't understand. To them, it looked like a curse, a calling of dark powers. In reality, she was signing, "The moon is pretty tonight. These men are fools. I hope the coffee is still warm." Several horses were dancing now, responding to their riders' fear. These men had come expecting to drag away a helpless victim. Instead, they faced something they didn't understand. A white woman who'd crossed into another world and returned changed. "Stop that!" Silas raised his rifle. "Stop that devil talk!" Crow emerged then, moving with the fluid grace that marked him as dangerous. He didn't point his weapon, didn't need to. His mere presence changed the very air. "You point a gun at my wife again," he said quietly, "and I'll kill you where you sit." "There's 20 of us and 2 of you," Silas blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes," Crow agreed. "I might not get all of you, but I'll get you first, Boone. And you, Morrison. And you, Worth. The question is, who wants to die for this? Who wants to explain to their widow why they died attacking a man's home in the night?" The silence stretched taut. Martha could see the riders reconsidering, courage cooling as fast as their blood. They'd expected fear, pleading, an easy victory. Not this. "You can't hide behind her forever," Silas tried one more time. "The whole territory will know what you are. Where you go, what you've done, you'll never have peace." "Peace?" Martha laughed again. "You think we had peace before? You think your judgment, your whispers, your small cruelties were peace?" She moved to stand beside Crow, their shoulders touching. "We'll make our own peace, far from here, far from you." "You're leaving?" This from Harold Garrett, sounding almost disappointed. "Why would we stay?" Martha asked. "This town has shown us what it is. But there are other places, other towns. People who judge a man by his actions, not his blood. Who see a woman's worth beyond her ability to hear." It was a lie, mostly. They both knew most places would be no different. But the suggestion that they might disappear, take their scandal elsewhere, was tempting bait. "Good riddance," someone muttered from the back. "Yes," Martha agreed. "Good riddance indeed. But know this," her voice hardened. "If any of you follow us, if any of you try to hunt us down, you'll learn what Apache justice looks like, and what a woman who's found her strength can do." She raised her hand, signing something complex in the firelight. Several men actually crossed themselves. "Now go," Crow commanded. "Before I decide 20-to-1 odds sound like fun." For a moment, the tableau held. Riders with torches facing 2 figures on a porch, violence balanced on a knife's edge. Then Silas Boone spat on the ground and wheeled his horse around. "This ain't over," he promised. But he was already leaving, and the others followed, their mob courage evaporating like morning mist. Martha and Crow stood watching until the last torch vanished into the trees. Only then did she allow herself to sag against him, adrenaline leaving her shaky. "That was dangerous," he said quietly. "Everything's dangerous now." She turned to face him. "We do need to leave. They'll be back, with more men or real law or worse." "I know." His hand cupped her face. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. If you weren't with me, if I wasn't with you, I'd be dead inside." She caught his hand, held it. "Or actually dead. My father would have killed me eventually, through neglect if not violence." They went inside, but neither could sleep. Instead, they sat by the fire, planning. Where to go, what to take, how to disappear into the vast western territories where 2 people might build a life without the weight of others' hate. "California," Crow suggested. "I have a cousin near Sacramento. Or Oregon, plenty of space there." "Anywhere," Martha agreed. "As long as it's together." As dawn broke, they heard a single horse approaching. Both tensed, but it was only Mrs. Fletcher, riding alone with a determined expression. "I'm sorry," she called out before they could speak. "About last night. About all of it. I came to warn you. Silas is riding to Fort Laramie. He's going to try to bring federal troops. Claim you're hostile." "We're leaving anyway," Martha told her. "I thought you might." Mrs. Fletcher dismounted, pulling a small bag from her saddle. "Here, it's not much. Some money, food for travel. And this." She handed Martha an envelope. Inside was a letter of recommendation, praising Martha's character, intelligence, and worth, signed by Reverend Fletcher and several other town notables. "It might help," Mrs. Fletcher said simply, "where you're going. And Martha, I want you to know, not everyone in town agrees with what happened. Some of us, we're ashamed. You deserved better." Martha's eyes burned. Thank you. Be happy, the older woman said fiercely. Both of you, be happy and prove them all wrong. She rode away quickly, as if afraid to linger. Martha and Crow stood in the dooryard, watching the sun rise over the mountains they'd called home. Are you ready? He asked. Martha looked at the cabin where she'd learned to be herself, at the man who'd shown her what love could be. Soon they'd be gone, riding into an uncertain future. There would be hardship, prejudice, danger. But there would also be freedom, possibility, hope. I'm ready, she said. They had work to do, packing what they could carry, preparing for a journey that might never really end. But for this moment, they stood together in the morning light. Two people who'd found each other against all odds. And that, Martha thought, was victory enough. They never made it to California. 3 days into their journey, as they camped by a stream swollen with snowmelt, the past caught up with them one final time. Martha was filling their water pouches when she heard the horses. Not the chaotic thunder of a mob this time, but the measured approach of men who knew their business. Crow was already moving, rifle in hand, but he stopped when he saw who led them. Sheriff Cooper, looking older than his years, accompanied by 2 deputies Martha didn't recognize. No Silas Boone, no mob, just the law, tired and muddy from hard riding. Sam, Cooper called out, hands visible and empty. Martha, we need to talk. Talk then, Crow replied, weapon lowered but ready. Cooper dismounted slowly, like a man carrying heavy news. There's been an incident in town. Josiah Brennan is dead. Martha felt the words hit her like physical blows, though she couldn't say she was surprised. Her father had been dying for years, poisoning himself with whiskey and hate. How? She asked quietly. Tried to burn down the Lucky Strike, said they were all to blame for losing you. Was too drunk to get out when the fire spread. Cooper's weathered face was grim. But before he died, he said things. About you, Martha. About why he really kept you close all those years. Sheriff, Crow warned, but Cooper held up a hand. She needs to hear this. Josiah confessed he'd been taking money from your mother's family back east. Every month for 19 years. Payment to keep you hidden, to never let you write or contact them. Martha's legs went weak. My mother had family? In Boston. Wealthy family who opposed her marriage. When she died, they wanted you, but Josiah, he saw an opportunity. Told them you were simple-minded, unable to travel. They've been sending money for your care ever since. The betrayal was staggering. All those years of poverty, of going hungry, while her father drank away money meant for her. There's more, Cooper continued. They're here, your family. Arrived yesterday when they heard about Josiah's death. I don't understand, Martha sighed, her hands shaking too much for speech. Your grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, and your aunt. They've come to take you home. Cooper's eyes flicked to Crow. Just you, Martha. Their offer doesn't extend to your husband. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Martha felt Crow's stillness beside her, the way he held himself ready for her choice. Always her choice. Where are they? She asked. Back at my office. They wanted to come themselves, but I convinced them to let me find you first. Thought it might go smoother. Cooper studied them both. They're offering you everything, Martha. Education, society, a life of comfort in Boston. All you have to do is leave here, leave him. And if I don't? Then they'll return to Boston empty-handed. They made that clear. It's all or nothing. Martha looked at Crow, seeing in his eyes what this meant. He would let her go, would want her to go, if it meant a better life. That was who he was, always putting her needs first. When do they need an answer? She asked. They're leaving tomorrow noon, with or without you. After Cooper left, Martha and Crow sat by their small fire in silence. The offer hung between them like a third presence, impossible to ignore. You should go, Crow signed finally. This is your chance for the life you deserve. The life I deserve is with you. In Boston, you could be anything, do anything. No one would know about your hearing, about your past. You could start fresh. Martha stood abruptly, anger flashing through her. Is that what you think I want? To hide who I am? To pretend these months never happened? I think, Crow said carefully, that I want you to be happy. And if that means, stop. She knelt in front of him, taking his scarred hands in hers. Listen to me, really listen. You saved me, not from my father or the town, but from the prison inside my own mind. You taught me I was worth saving. Do you think money could replace that? Do you think Boston society could give me what you have? Martha, I choose you, she said fiercely. I will always choose you, today, tomorrow, every day after, not because I have to, because I want to, because the thought of a life without you is worse than any hardship we might face together. He pulled her into his arms then, holding her like she might vanish. You humble me, he whispered into her hair. Good, she whispered back. Someone should. The next morning they rode back to Silver Creek together. The town seemed smaller somehow, less significant. Martha wore her best dress, Sarah's dress, and had braided her hair in the style Crow had taught her, with beads and feathers that marked her as chosen. Sheriff Cooper's office was crowded. Margaret Whitmore sat rigid in her black traveling dress, her face a older, harsher version of the portrait Martha had once seen of her mother. Beside her, a younger woman, Aunt Catherine, watched with curious eyes. Martha? Margaret's voice was cultured, cold. My goodness, you look, well, grandmother. The word felt strange on Martha's tongue. Aunt Catherine. We've come to take you home, Margaret announced, as if it were already decided. Your father's deceptions have been revealed. There's no reason for you to remain in this situation. My husband, you mean? Martha let her hand rest on Crow's arm. This situation is my life, my choice. Catherine leaned forward. You can't mean to stay here, with him. Martha, you don't understand what you're giving up. I understand perfectly. I'm giving up strangers who abandoned me for 19 years, who sent money to ease their conscience, but never once tried to see if I was alive or dead. Your father told us, Margaret began. My father lied, but you never questioned it, did you? Never wondered if a child might need more than money? Margaret's face flushed. How dare you? How dare I? Martha laughed, but it wasn't bitter. She'd moved past bitterness. I dare because I've learned my worth, not from blood or money or Boston society, but from a man who saw me when I was invisible, who heard me when I was silent. This is ridiculous, Margaret stood. You're coming with us. I'll have you declared incompetent if necessary. Try, Crow spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but full of promise. See how far you get. Sheriff Cooper cleared his throat. Mrs. Whitmore, Martha is a legal adult, married. You have no claim on her. Married to a savage? Margaret spat. Married to a man, Martha corrected. A good man, the best man. She looked at her grandmother with something almost like pity. I'm sorry you traveled so far for nothing, but I have a life here, a real life, not the pretty prison you're offering. Catherine spoke up, softer than her mother. Martha, please, think about your future. Children, do you want them to grow up facing the prejudice? Yes, Martha interrupted. I want them to grow up strong, to know their worth doesn't come from others' approval, to understand that love is worth more than comfort. She stood, done with this conversation. If you ever want to know me, really know me, not the idea of me you've carried, you can write. Sheriff Cooper will forward letters. But I won't pretend to be someone I'm not. Not for you, not for anyone. They left the office to find a crowd gathered. The whole town, it seemed, drawn by the drama. But something had shifted. Martha saw it in their faces. The woman who'd faced down a mob, who'd turned down a fortune for love. She wasn't the same deaf girl they'd dismissed. As they walked to their horses, Mrs. Fletcher stepped forward. Martha, she said loudly, clearly. God bless you both. Others echoed her, not many, but some. The blacksmith's apprentice, Dr. Henderson, even Clara Morrison, blushing but determined. They rode out of Silver Creek for the last time, but now Martha knew they wouldn't go far. The cabin on Bear Mountain was theirs, legally and morally. They'd stay, build their life, face whatever came. That evening, as snow began to fall again, they stood outside their cabin, looking down at the valley below. The lights of Silver Creek twinkled in the distance, but they seemed part of another world now. Any regrets? Crow asked, arms wrapped around her from behind. None, Martha said, leaning into his warmth. You? Only that it took so long to find you. She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his scarred face. We found each other. That's what matters. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, as snow fell around them like blessings. Inside the cabin, their life waited. Simple, difficult at times, but theirs. I love you, she said against his lips, the words still new enough to thrill. And I love you, he replied. My fierce little bird, my warrior woman, my wife. They went inside together, closing the door against the cold and the past. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The prejudice wouldn't vanish. The judgment wouldn't stop. But tonight, in their cabin filled with books and carvings and possibility, they were simply two people who'd chosen each other against all odds, who'd found in that choosing a love worth any sacrifice. And in the end, that was everything. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the mountain in pristine white. A new beginning, a clean slate, a future written not by others' expectations, but by their own hands, their own hearts, their own unshakable choice. Together. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Please comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Martha and Crow's journey. Your feedback means the world to us.